Welcome everyone. Welcome to the New England College of Business, and welcome to the Innovation Room. I'm Debra Leahy, I'm the Provost of the New England College of Business. Let me tell you a little bit about where you are tonight. Some of you teach here or learn here, are friends of our college, so you know about us, but let me tell for those who don't know. New England College of Business is very relevant that we're talking about online education tonight. We are a 100% online college. We're actually the only 100% online college accredited by NEASC, our accreditor. And we have actually been around longer than you might think. We've been around since 1909. And when I'm at a cocktail party and I'm talking about where I work, what often comes up is New England College of Business, and I keep going back in time. American Institute of Banking. And people say, oh, and everyone has a story about the American Institute of Banking, including a very dear colleague of mine I worked with at Emmanuel College who said, I was working down the street and a man walked in and he was kind of disheveled looking, kind of hot, it was a humid day. He walked in and he asked if I knew how to teach. I said no. He said, what would you like to teach? I said, I've always thought that would be good. He said, well, we teach banking. And he was hired. And he said, but when do I start? Tomorrow. So what does that mean? Well, maybe it means that in our history we weren't very time cognizant, but it also means what we have done throughout our history for over 100 years is we found people who work in the industries and have had them come in as practitioner educators. And that's really what has kept us constant over the years. So maybe our name has changed, maybe the format by which we teach has changed, but that has not changed. So that is where the Innovation Room came from. So just a little bit more about the college is that we have 3 undergraduate degrees, actually four undergraduate degrees, including our associates. And we have 5 master's degrees, all delivered 100% online. So I think maybe we're equipped to talk about online education tonight. The Innovation Room. The Innovation Room was born out of this legacy that we have of grabbing bankers off the street, but also beyond that, bringing together industry and education. And thinking that sometimes in higher education there's a bifurcated line between industry and education, and that line needs to be far more blurred. That needs to be a marriage. So the Innovation Room is as such a marriage. So usually I'm up here presenting who our presenter is, but tonight I'm the presenter as well as my colleague. Patrick Hutchinson is our General Education Chair and Professor in Art History and Literature, and I'm, as I said, Debra Leahy, the Provost. So tonight, what are we going to tell you? We're going to tell you about quality online education. We're going to go through a lot of iterations about online education, but what we would like to really pinpoint for you is if you're looking at online education, whether that's because you want to study online, your son or daughter wants to study online, your friend wants to study online, or if you're just a connoisseur of online education, which I think most people in this room are connoisseurs of online education, how do you know if there's quality versus only access? So we'll get started. So right now I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in higher education in general and where online comes into that. So to quote Curtis Bonk, there is a perfect e-storm right now. And the perfect e-storm means there's a confluence in higher education. There are some trends going up, some trends going down, and how do we bring them together? So one trend going up is we are in a knowledge economy. So if you think back, lower level jobs are starting to be eliminated. If you've ever called and gotten involved in a phone tree, I'm sure you like that, you know we're in a knowledge economy. And so the Georgetown University Center on Education and Workforce has been predicting workforce trends for many years. And they have predicted by 2018, nearly 63% of prime-time age workers will need to have at least some college education. And we'll talk further about what form that education takes. So we see an upward arrow, right? But then we see a downward arrow. This is where the storm analogy comes in. However, we're having a rapidly retiring population. So we look at the US Census. 2012, we had 43.1 million retirements, but it's predicted for 2050 to be 83.1 million. That's a pretty big, that's a seismic change, shall we say. Also, we have a lot of people who have gone to college, a lot of adults who have gone to college and not finished. People carrying around college credits, but not actually cobbling them into a college degree. In Massachusetts, and a lot of people in this room are in Massachusetts, so I'm going to sound a little erudite, but we have a lot of colleges and universities here, so if one were to finish their education, you would think Massachusetts might be a conducive place. But in Massachusetts, it's the Lumina Foundation has indicated about 17% of adults in Massachusetts have some college, but not a degree. take that nationally. Does anyone want to guess nationally what percentage of people do not have a degree with us in college? 25%. Double it. So we double the number. Nationally, double the number. We have people without college degrees that were cobbled together. Did Carla guess that?
I did.
Oh, you did? Okay, she should get credit. She gets credit. So there will be grading at the end. There will be online grading through rubrics, as you'll see.
Excellent.
And I think being someone who's worked in higher education, I feel like since I was born, one of the saddest downward trends right now for me is not one that you can quantify. There's not one that you can quantify, is that the level of confidence in higher education has actually gone down. We'll talk a lot about media perceptions about higher education. And one perception about higher education, and if you go, whether it's a trade publication that's beyond higher ed or one within higher ed, including our friend Inside Higher Ed, which I read every morning, is a college degree worth it? You know, if I go to college, okay, I might have an enjoyable experience, I might like my faculty, but am I going to walk out, and you'll hear this term a lot tonight, with durable skills, with portable skills, and the confidence level just isn't there. And it's actually not attached to any particular majors. I think liberal arts, and Patrick and I are actually both liberal arts professors. I think liberal arts gets the worst reputation, but it's not confined there. And we'll talk further about liberal arts. But what does this confluence equate to? We'll talk a lot about equations tonight. So the confluence equates to a talent gap. Because on top of all of this, even demographic changes show that people between the ages of 18 and 24 are on the decline because of demographic changes. So who's going to take these high-level jobs? And we really haven't defined what a knowledge economy is because it's not definable. A knowledge economy obviously is more of what we call a white-collar economy with knowledge-based jobs. But I say the thing that defines a knowledge economy best is there's no definition. I know, Carla, in your MBA program, you focus on unstructured problems,
right. Unstructured
problem solving. The jobs that we're educating people for today, a lot of them haven't been invented yet. So how does an education system deal with that? So how do we meet the needs? We have some great quotes in this presentation. One is from Howard Gardner, who we all know. We've learned a lot in our field from Howard Gardner. But what he says is simply being the smartest person in one's discipline will no longer suffice. So call it a content knowledge alone will not suffice. So are we looking from a shift from credentials to competencies? Now, working in higher education, being a chief academic officer, am I going to say a college degree is not worth it? Of course not. A college degree is very worth it. But competencies have to accompany that. So we have to know what those competencies are. So durable and portable workplace competencies are a heightened focus. So therefore the confluence we're talking about is sitting there as a perfect E-storm, but it also becomes an imperative. How will we deliver? I think we have an upward arrow. Online education. So before we talked about demand, now we're talking about access. So where do we get the access? We get the access like we have for a century. We get the access all over higher education. Actually, we met with a college president yesterday who was saying that they used to have a certain number of applicants and there'd be a long discussion about who would make the grade. And they're accepting more students, there's more need. But what is the form of education that goes beyond borders, goes beyond boundaries? Can do things in a transformative way. Online education. What is the form of education that's very much up for debate in higher education scholarship and media? Online education. What is the form of education that is growing? Last Babson Survey Research Group is the group that tracks online education. It's not the only group that tracks online education, but it is a group that is considered quite credible. Until recently, we'll talk about that. So, they reported in their last report 7.1 million students studying online in 2013. That's up from 6.7 million in 2012. They also reported 70.7% of institutions currently report having online offerings. That could be courses, that could be full programs. And then we look at full programs. This is a big leap. 34.5% report full online programs, but in 2012, 34.5% in 2002 had fully online programs in 2012. That shot up to 62.5%. But wait a minute. Inside Higher Education recently accused Babson Research Group of inflating their numbers. Why would they inflate their numbers? They don't get commission for every online students. What happened is iPads have taken over counting the online students. Is anyone here familiar with iPads? iPads counts traditional students mostly, traditional programs. They count the programs that offer traditional degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, full-time seekers. Babson doesn't. 725 institutions were missing from the iPads count. So inside higher education said, it's got to be it. Babson inflated their numbers. No, because when they actually went back and they looked at the 725 institutions, the vast majority of them were under 1,000 students. And they were offering online education in different ways. If you ever go on Northeastern University's website and you look at their online certificate programs, they do not offer college credit. There are many certificate programs out there. They wouldn't be counted in iPads. So this is a way that we've seen online has grown, that's changed. What hasn't changed is online seeks to reach the learner where he or she studies, works, and learns. And also we look at growth in general. The growth of online may have ebbed and flowed. It was actually a decline this year in some areas, but it has grown faster than the overall growth rate of higher ed. Okay, so if you think about online, if I'm the leader of a college, I'm a president, and I'm thinking about why might I have online education? There's some great things I can do. I can get more students. The construction cranes stopped. We don't have to build a new quad. We don't have to build a new lab. And this is a cynical look, but it is true. And it's come across, there were studies done where they looked at speeches by presidents, speeches by chief academic officers about what online will bring us. But when they looked at faculty manuals, training manuals, policy manuals, it didn't carry through in some cases. So it's great, we can get more students. Who doesn't want more students? More tuition. We can get more academic programs, we can add that healthcare program. We can get more visibility. We can get broader geographical reach. There's a whole group of students in Texas. Texas is pretty big, right? We can get that. We can get more international students. Wow. But, what are we thinking here? If we're talking about that E-storm, so a storm can go many ways. A storm can bring a great result. It can bring beauty, it can bring disaster. Where are we going with this? So is online education a panacea? Can it meet all the demand through access? Not at all. Can online education balance the confluence? Yeah. But there's some measures we need to take. So I did not come up with E-storm. I still wish I could take credit for that term. I still wish I could. I trademark it. But Kurt Baum, who's a professor at Indiana University and president of CourseShare, has come up with the perfect E-storm. And his version of the perfect E-storm, not the E-storm, the perfect E-storm, is we can bring together pedagogy, technology, and learner needs in order to meet the needs of an evolving workforce. But we have another equation to look at, can we? It depends on which equation we choose. So demand plus access can equal quality, or it might not equal quality. And that's really what we're here to talk about tonight, right? Is the quality there? The quality's there, how do you know it? Is our access agenda paired with a quality agenda? So tonight this is what we're talking about. So I've given you the perfect E-storm. I've brought you into the perfect E-storm. We'll talk about background trends in online education. Patrick is going to talk about history, where did online education come from. We'll talk about what gets in the way of a quality agenda. We'll talk about if we can get beyond what gets in the way of a quality agenda, transformative ways of online teaching and learning, and how it's amazing how they mirror exactly what's being said about 21st century workplace skills, how online education comes up to be paired with that so well. Really, when we talk about that perfect marriage, the storm that results in a perfect outcome. And at the end, we will, and throughout actually, we will talk about the online, adult online learner backpack. So if you're looking, someone's looking, what do you look for? How do you know it's there? How do you decide? So, that, turn it over to Patrick.
Make sure I don't trip on anything.
Could be interesting.
So I get to talk about a few fun things tonight. I like this. So the history that we know of online and correspondence education. So doing some research, we found that how did online develop? Well, as far as we understand, it was the corporate world, right, Paula, that started online education. So we found this from shiftelearning.com. What it says here is American corporations, 70% of American corporations, at least recently, are using online education. So for their professional development and all those kinds of ideas. But as far as we know, that's where most of this got started.
Patrick, can you speak up?
Yes, I will try.
People online are clamoring for your voice.
Oh, good.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
thank you.
I couldn't help it.
So, obviously online education has been around for about maybe 15, 20 years, something like that. But as you can see, University of Phoenix, despite what people might think, did not actually invent online education. It's been around for it's been around for a while, and people think University of Phoenix did invent this because you see all the ads, you see how much press they get, but it's actually, they were not the first people to do this. Now, if you want to really go back quite a way, you can actually look at the history of correspondence school. What I was able to find, and this is, you can find this quite readily on the internet, one of the first instances or advertisements for correspondence education was from 1728 in the Boston Gazette. This is an example right here for Caleb, I can't remember his last name, but he was a businessman and he was selling courses in shorthand. And so he would send lessons to their home. You could do your instructions and mail it to him. He would grade it and send it back to you with another lesson. So this ties in with what we're talking about because, as you can see, there's been lots of different formats for education for a very long time. This goes back 300 years or so. So while obviously it's not online, you can see the connections that are being made. Correspondence courses still do exist, and we'll talk about that on the next page. So correspondence courses still linger. It says for better or worse in some cases. Well, I did some research on that as well, and so what you have on the screen is perhaps an example of not the best case of a correspondence school. It's a little hard to see, but what this is supposed to be is some brakes down here and a steering wheel. And there was a time when you could do truck driving through correspondence school, apparently, and so they would mail you a steering wheel and some brakes and a gas pedal, and you go on your TV or your computer, and that's how you learn to drive. So we thought that was an interesting example to share because maybe it works well. I don't have any data on graduates or what might work on that, but it doesn't, when you think about truck driving, I don't know if that's like the best way to learn that way. But then I just spoke to NIASC, and they do still have some photography correspondence courses apparently in California, and they are popular and they've done well. So you can see that what we're getting into here is that education isn't always just about going into the classroom. It's about what you have, but how you do it as well, and how successful you can be with it. All right, so here's online education. We've got some of the big names here: University of Phoenix, Debra, Liberty. What we've put up here is that Shannon Doherty. I don't know if you remember the commercials where she was on online college, online connection, something like that, and she would come out and say, I got my degree in liberal arts online, why don't you come and do that too? And who knows if she really did that, but those commercials and then some of the other commercials with different actresses in their pajamas kind of, I think, for better or for worse, brought forth some of the ideas of online into the mainstream. I don't know if it was the most positive way to do so, but it's a way a lot of people started understanding that online was out there. And now we're going to get into some ideas about access. What is quality and what might stand in the way? So you have these pictures of, this is what still I think some of the general public thinks of as online. You sit at home, you're in your pajamas, you can do your work anytime, it's easy, is the idea. You don't have to work hard, you can kind of be lazy on your couch. So what's quality and what is access and how do you get those two together?
Okay, so in order for us to have this access agenda, so online, I don't know if everyone knows this, it's beyond working in your pajamas at home. If anyone doesn't know that, you should raise your hand because we will call you out. But it has to be matched with a quality agenda. But what gets in the way of this equation coming together? So there are still misnomers, and those of us who work in higher education, who go to conferences or go to cocktail, I'll mention cocktail parties, go to cocktail parties, we have these conversations with people. When I give my business card and someone says, where is NECB, where's New England College of Business? And when I say we're 100% online, I always get the, oh, what's that like? So these are a few of the misnomers that I know we've heard more than others. So the first one is dichotomous thinking. When is the last time a problem been solved with dichotomous thinking? Now, Donald Trump might say, in the next election, but I think not. So, but definitely not in online education. Online education is a nuanced field, and I'm looking at a lot of people who work in online education. It's a very nuanced field. So, but unfortunately, there's so much dichotomous thinking, whether it's in everyday conversation among educators, among the general public, in the media, and it's often a thumbs up or thumbs down vote, right? So those who think not so much. So it's inferior. It's an apology. I'm going to online because I can't go face to face. I've got kids, I can't make it to the campus. I guess I'll just do this online option. Online students don't retain. I did research recently. I went back to one of my alma maters, and after a long conversation with my former advisor, she said, yeah, you guys must have a real hard time with retention. And our retention rates were higher than where I came from. But so one thing that is interesting, what we're learning is, on one hand, of course, you can't speak for all students. So online will work for some and it won't work for others. Online will retain some and it won't retain others. But as the further we go into online education, one thing we're learning is some surprises. So here at NECB, we have all adult learners. 96% of them are employed, average age 35. They're working. I have, in my own class, I have vice presidents of banks. Online education is going to work for them, and not because it's a secondary choice, because it's what works for them, because it's a consistent design, it's reliable, it matches their workplace, so it's not an apology. But the interesting thing is, I'm involved with AACMU, the American Associated of Schools and Colleges. Very traditional liberal arts group. I've been going to their conferences for years. They had a focus, they had some members come in who had conducted a focus group. And they thought the last student who would do online, and I have to admit in my past life I thought this too, the last student who would do well online would be the at-risk learner, because it does take self-motivation. But a group of students who were interviewed came forward and said, no, actually, I was always nervous to speak up in college. I took college classes on ground, and what I found was I was afraid to speak my mind, but I knew the stuff. So whether they started online and they transitioned or they stayed online, a lot of these students in the focus group really spoke their mind. Is that there was a democratizing effect, which we'll talk about later. It really made them feel like, I can speak my mind, I can show how smart I am, and I don't feel nervous sitting next to someone who I assume to be smarter than me. Also, studies with veterans have found online works well for them. A veteran who's served overseas might not want to come into a classroom with people much younger with such different world experiences. So we can't have dichotomous thinking, because wouldn't we miss those examples if we had dichotomous thinking? But then there's the upvote. I did meet someone who told me anything can be taught online. Do you want to be on the road with a truck driver who got the steering wheel, the brake, and maybe the gas pedal? So, do I want my doctor who's about to perform surgery on me to say, don't worry, I got my degree online? No. So we can't go too far. You can't go too far one side or the other. There's also this notion where some people will come out and say these pronouncements, online will replace face-to-face. There will be no more brick and mortar. That's never going to be the case. Those of you who send children to college, who want their children to have the on-ground experience, gosh, that should always be there. I would, as chief academic officer in online college, I would be sad if that were the case. So our president termed the phrase, it's an evolution, not a revolution. So an evolution means that it will enter into the mainstream. It will meet the needs of the learners for whom will learn best in this environment, but not everyone. So we don't want it to take over. Online is easy. I'll just take an online class next semester. I used to work for some place that had an equal balance of online and traditional on-ground students, and I was walking down the hallway and I heard someone say, I'm just going to take an online class over the summer. It's easier. And I wanted to be the busybody who stopped her and said, let me tell you, it's not easy. So online is very different from what some people might imagine before they get into it. So how many people have gotten this paper? You get a paper that says A, and you don't know why. It's the saddest A in the world. You want to celebrate the A, you want to go out for drinks with your friends, but you don't know why you got the A. How many people have gotten a rubric that says exactly what you did well and exactly what you need to work on with some good notation from your faculty member? Online is not easier by any stretch of the imagination. So what online provides, and I'm not saying the face-to-face, and I should preface this entire presentation by saying this is not an anti-face-to-face. Face-to-face will always be there. I'm so happy about that. We'll meet many learners' needs. And some of them knock it out of the park. I've had experiences face-to-face that have just been great. But one thing that online education has done specifies how many hours of engagement. The federal government actually requires that. So you have to go in and predetermine a lot when you develop an online class. Numbers of engagement, points of assessment, when should you hear from your faculty member, rubric intense learning environment, what did you do well, what did you not do well. Actually before coming here, and I should admit this, I taught for 15 years. I've never used a rubric before I came here that was provided by the institution. I created my own from time to time, and they were very rudimentary. But before I came here, I had never used a full-fledged rubric, and I've graded easily over 800 papers. So demands are high, and learners need to be self-motivated. So not easy by any chance. And we were talking about the democratizing effect. With online education, we talked earlier about the surprise that at-risk learners can do well in online education because there's no pecking order. But also, at the same time, everyone sits in the front row. You can't be shy, you can't be absent, you can't be not show up for class, you can't do that, can't sleep in class. And so one phrase that will come up a lot in this presentation, online demands a very strong accountability for contributions of thought. Thinking is always visible and it's always challenged. The best is when a learning environment such as a discussion board gets heated. A lot of times at the start of the class, and those of you who teach online know, at the start sometimes people are polite and then people say things that they wouldn't say face to face, and that's not to say they're not civil, that's to say they're honest and they challenge thought. Barbara Hoskins, who's assistant dean at Clemson University and who's studied and written a lot about online education, used this term cognitive absorption. And her feeling is passive learners need not apply. Like we said, it's not for everyone. But the way she defines this is a high degree of cognitive absorption may be exhibited by immersion into a subject. If you teach, do you not want this? Immersion into a subject matter, heightened enjoyment, control, and curiosity. If you teach, do you not want this? Of course you do. Okay. And there's a growing realization. So we're back to our friends Lebowski study. We do like that like this. So what they found was, in 2014, the most recent study, 44.5% of academic leaders felt it was harder to retain students in online classes versus 27.2% in 2004. Some people would look at that and say that's bad news. You're not retaining students. That's not bad news. There's a growing realization that you need the right students to be in online, and you need to set the expectations. Also, and those of you who teach in the room would feel good about this, 76.3% of academic leaders think it takes a great effort to build an online course. I don't think anyone in this room would say, I don't believe that. And that is one of the stats that has stayed almost consistent for the 10 years or over the 10 to 12 years that FAFSA has been doing this study. So strategy plus appropriate expectations can equal optimal learning in teaching environment. Myth number 3, online faculty are not real. If that's the case, then I must have died and I'm in an alternate reality because I'm looking at a lot of online faculty who do not look like this, by the way. I can see them, they don't look like this. So faculty are facilitators only. Is that true? Sometimes. So when we talk about the adult online learner backpack, one thing we'll talk about is the questions to ask before you do enroll in an online program. Online education, we're talking about it tonight and in general. It differs greatly. There are companies that build online courses. There are companies down the street here in Boston. There are companies in India that build online courses. Colleges can opt to buy those, and many do, but many do not. So to say all online is delivered by facilitators would be quite wrong because there are very real passionate faculty who develop courses. Students cannot bond with online faculty. I hear that quite a bit. I hear some of my own friends in my own generation saying, I don't know. I really like getting to know my faculty members. I'm linked in with any faculty member I've taken an online course. And I teach a course, and the last assignment on the discussion board includes link in with those with whom you felt like you had a bond. And the online format is a natural progression to do that LinkedIn. So there's a word that always comes to mind when I talk with people about developing curriculum here versus developing curriculum where I've taught elsewhere, develop curriculum elsewhere, and that's the word intentional. So if you're building an online course, you have to decide what part of this online class is going to be consistent. From course to course, and adult learners like that consistency, as do some other learners who choose it. What part is going to be consistent, and what part is going to be spontaneous? I have certainly developed courses in face-to-face, and I don't know if I thought that through as much as I would have liked to have. And later we're going to actually talk about what face-to-face could learn from online. Also, there's an intentional decision about where will there be outlets for faculty to interact with students and students to interact with students. Does it mean you have to stay there, that you're tied to that, that you have handcuffs to that? Of course not. You can go above and beyond, but what is the minimum? And there's intentional embedded audio and video feedback that you can or can't use. Depends on what your comfort level is, depends on the type of course it is. Some courses, digital marketing lends itself extremely well. Spontaneity, of course. We'll never lose spontaneity in education. If we ever do, I'd have to get out of business. Distance can be your friend. So I used to oversee an English department with poets. It's one of my best experiences. And they would come to me just totally stressed out that someone didn't make it on time for the lecture. Can we still pay them? That was always my favorite question. They're not delivering. What business is that we're in? But anyway, something happened where the guest lecturer was coming in and didn't make it. Or someone wanted to come in and couldn't come in because of distance. We just couldn't, small budget, you can't afford that. Can we bring in guest lecturers in an online class? Of course you can. If you think about it, and I think every online faculty member should think, am I leveraging this enough? The red sweater lady has come in Dr. Mariponi's class and talked about corporate communications from a very high level. Could we afford to bring the red sweater lady in? I don't think so. Our own president has come in and led discussion boards. The interesting thing about this is when you think about guest lecturers in an online class, you think, isn't that great? Distance has been overcome, but so has time. Because if you brought a guest lecturer in, like one of my poets would bring in someone, brought in Robert Pinsky, which is pretty cool. Could we have Robert Pinsky for 5 weeks? I doubt it. You know, the National Poet Laureate probably would not live with us for 5 weeks. But can you have it online? Absolutely. Whether you have a recorded lecture from that person is involved in the discussion board for 5 weeks, all of a sudden, space and time, they're really your friends. Warren Buffett does not teach here, so I will not make their claim. However, can you bring in famous people? Can you collapse time, space, and notoriety too at the same time? So Northeastern University has had Warren Buffett come in for a MOOC, a massive online open course, and taught a class with his sister, Doris Buffett, on giving with purpose. So there's many benefits to this, but I'm going to mention a couple. And Doris Buffett walked away talking about everything we're talking about tonight, which is giving with purpose allows us to extend the classroom walls to include any individual passionate about philanthropy. Thousands of people, energy, ideas want to make a difference. So what this did was not only did it allow Warren Buffett to go to Northeastern University, which I'm guessing maybe he would not have done otherwise, but what he taught people in this class was how to give their great wealth, but with purpose. And that's what they did. That was their final assignment. Did all the students make it through? Of course not. Did all the students give money? Of course not. But it opened the walls, and it allowed people to come in and understand the tenets that are behind. When I have a great deal of money, and I want to give it, how do I give it with purpose? And it was Warren Buffett. People will talk about that the rest of their lives. Myth number 4, I'm lonely. No bonding with my peers. What do you do? I remember Chris Weir, who's in the audience, once facilitated a discussion on Facebook. And we had a social media expert, and Chris asked the social media expert, aren't you lonely? Doesn't this create more loneliness? But my favorite part of that whole presentation was the social media expert. There was a pregnant pause. And he said, Chris, you teach online? Chris said, yes. He said, are you lonely? And Chris said, no. So I do remember that. So can you bond with your peers? Remember my example at the end of my sociology class, everyone links in only with those with whom they felt they made a connection. The same statement, online demands strong accountability for your contributions, and your thoughts, your thinking is always visible and always challenged. Are you developing authentic peer-to-peer relations in online? Of course you are. Is any way the distance mitigating that? No, the distance isn't mitigating. Can you have coffee? Probably not. Unless you both pour a cup of coffee and sit together, which is possible. But online education includes group work, includes discussion boards, where you are required to participate. Doesn't requirement sound like there's no spontaneity? Of course it does. But depending on the level of the online class and this is where you want to ask those questions if you're looking, depending on the level and the nature and the character of that online class, you might interact in ways that you otherwise wouldn't. In my class, I stress visual representation. So right now, we're talking about crime in urban areas. Everyone's posting visuals of areas where they felt safe and not safe. If I was having a class with Michelle, would I show her a visual? I might describe the visual, therefore the visual in my mind is coming up. But would I actually share that with her, and would she have the palpable feeling of seeing the visual about where I felt not safe and why connected to the learner's learning? So groups are often forced to define ground rules. So if anyone here has ever been in a group where everyone did not do the same level of participation.
Well, that's never happened.
Never happened to you. No. So, yeah. In an online class, I'm sure in the MBA program we see this a lot, people come forward, but you can actually map back. Not to get people in trouble and say, okay, Johnny didn't participate, but there are learning moments where the participation didn't occur. And that's a moment where a student has failed to participate but can learn in the future how to participate. So distance can be your friend. This is actually an area where I think online education could go much further. We can participate across cultural borders. And I think it's getting there in some ways, but I think it could go further. So there's potential here. Peer-to-peer cognitive absorption, we talked about Barbara Hoskins earlier talking about how people come together in online spaces in novel ways, creating authentic social networks. We're creating social networks every day. Tonight we're creating a social network. Are they authentic? Is Chris lonely? I'm not sure. Are they authentic? So Barbara Hoskins describes how in an online course, because that's what she studied, she describes a community of inquiry model. She talks about overlapping spheres of student content, interaction, teacher-student interaction, and student-student interaction. And what she has found in her research is that there's a maximum educational experience in the center of the overlaps. That perfect storm is looking good right now. Okay, misnomer 5, I'm just not that technical. I have to have my kids do everything. I don't know what's going on. I'm gonna leave that to the digital natives. I can't live with my thumbs. It's not the same. Anyone who's taught online knows that someone who's particularly good with Facebook or Tinder or so forth isn't actually, that doesn't translate to this. It's a different kind of technology. And this is not to downplay the technology, especially because in a few minutes we're actually going to talk about what technology enables. But technology is actually secondary to the content and the delivery. You could have 2 faculty members teaching an online course, same structure, and it could come out very differently. So maybe the structure is there, but it comes out very differently. One of my favorite quotes is from Dick Clark. No, not American Bandstand Dick Clark, because that would be odd. I don't know if we trust his viewpoint so much, but Dick Clark, some of us saw him speak at Northeastern recently, the director of the Center for Cognitive Technology at the University of Southern California. And I love this because he actually made the statement in the 1980s. Media are mere vehicles that deliver instructions but do not influence student achievement any more than the truck that delivers our grocery causes changes in our nutrition. Now I think since online has become so rich, I think this is less true actually. But I think we all get where he's coming from. That the technology the truck cannot drive your nutrition. But I don't know, if you can do more with it, more so. Okay, so hindrances. We have a lot of hindrances. We have a lot of hindrances from popular press, everyday conversation, people who maybe not be informed, but are we our own worst enemies in some cases in higher education? When I said earlier that someone told me students don't retain, that was a senior professor at a university I attended who felt that way. One key aspect of that conversation, she's never taught online. And she doesn't have any online courses in her program. So when we look back at the Babson study, 70.8% of academic leaders indicate that online is critical to their institution's long-term strategy. And that's way up since 2002, the first year of the Babson study. That's up from 48.8%. That's a seismic leap. And academic leaders have been saying this year, 74.1% say that the learning outcomes of online education are equal or greater to face-to-face. And that's up from 57.2% in 2003. Do you see the drop here, though? Only 28% of academic leaders indicate that faculty see the value of online. And that's only marginally better from when the survey first was administered. So are we giving it a chance? But I have to tease this out further because this is the more critical part. When you bifurcate the results from those who have taught online and those who haven't taught online, there's a huge gap. Those who have not taught online don't see the learning goals as equal or greater than. They don't see the value in online, and those who have, that goes up greatly. So, seems obvious, right? But when you see the stats, when you see the data, it looks discouraging until you tease it out. Remember the point about no dichotomous thinking. So how do they know? What goes into the academic strategic plan? So what can we do? If we're going to make online education part of the solution, not the solution, we already said it's not a panacea, but part of the solution, what do we do? So we have to dispel misnomers and overcome hindrances because it will transform not just online education, it will transform all of education. It will transform face-to-face education as well. So we have to transcend and broaden historical methods of education, which is talk about next. Leverage technology for enhanced teaching and learning, also talk about next. And what we already talked about, bring in faculty, bring in guest lecturers, really push the envelope. Talk about when you push the envelope. So when you bring in a great guest lecturer, I know Janine's program, you interview people in the field. Bring that up, talk about we can do this. Create a more pluralistic student body. One of the great experiences I had was having a peer review partner in New Zealand, talking about quality assurance in higher ed. I benefited so much from talking about someone who was literally across the globe about how do they manage quality assurance. I was shocked by some of the differences. Study without loss of family in your whole life. So when you were going through your think about your most difficult, trying academic experience. Did you want your spouse there, your kids, or did you want to be totally separate from them? If you answer the latter, you might want to talk later. So leverage the diverse forms of education because that's the only way we're going to meet the growing needs. It can't be one size fits all. And higher ed, leverage it. So if our strategic plan comes out and someone says, but wait a minute, there's been a leak. I discovered 3,000 other universities have the same strategic plan. Are we in trouble? Is this an interesting trouble? So a severe example, but of course. So we have to do things differently. Expand, enhance, evolve, and enliven paradigms of teaching and learning. So just quickly what we can talk about, and then we're going to get to talking about what to look for in online education, is how people learn. Because one of the shifts that online education is credited for is not only looking for how we teach. How we teach, that's been centuries discussion, and it's a great discussion, and I hope it lasts for centuries longer. But how do we learn? So learning theory has guided how we learn. But didn't we start this whole conversation by saying this is for a 21st century learner? And the 21st century learner is unstructured, unpredictable, not yet determined, very much in flux what that's going to be. But what if we have learning theories determining what we're going to teach and what we're going to learn that are based in the past? So this is a severe example. This is our friend here. And he has learned to bounce and the doggy tree. I just love the picture. But if we look back over the learning theories that have guided us throughout the 20th century and still guide us today, should, behavioral learning theory is what really got us thinking about how people learn. So I tell you to do something. I tell you to do that, that, and that, and that's what you do. And I say, that's great, you did that. But that learning theory assumed that all learning was visible. That we could see that someone did this, that, and that. We gave you a structured problem and you solved it. Check. Does it translate to online? Yeah, of course it does. Actually, one of the better, I used to oversee an academic support system, and we used Plato. Plato was amazing, and this is back when online learning really wasn't developed yet, but I was amazed that we could put students in a laboratory and they could go through without any penalty, and they could test their knowledge. And each time they got a wrong answer, it would prompt them. It would tell them what they got wrong. I thought, wow, I can see why people would say the brick and mortar is going away, but then of course I thought it through more. But so adaptive learning. Here at NECV we use a lot of adaptive learning, especially for developmental courses or those lower in the undergraduate paradigm. But even further up we use adaptive learning. So it's great, we can tell you what to do. It can be non-graded, it can be self-paced, self-reflective. My students take a progress monitor, they figure out this is what I knew, this is what I know now. We want that forever, but we can't stay there. We have to move on. So, learning theory has moved on. So I'm making a seismic leap here. I'm not saying we went from the dog, the bono's nose to this. So learning theory has understood from behavioral that not all learning is observable, so it's in your mind too. Not all learning comes from the instructor to the student, but it's shared. It's constructivist. But going beyond constructivist, what if we felt like when we got to a constructivist model, that was outstanding? Because we realized we don't have to rely on one person to teach us everything. We learn from each other, we learn from the teacher, we learn from our resources. But what if we took that to an online paradigm? What if we thought, I can learn from the people who are in this classroom with me, and I can learn from people in India, and I can learn from resources that have been developed in India. I can learn from someone who's living in Nepal. I can learn from something that only exists, it's not tangible, it's online. And I brought all this together. All of a sudden, learning would take on a multi-direction beyond our imaginations, and there's no limit. So in order to give this presentation, I did a little research. So I took 32 empirical articles, and the requirement for these articles was that they had to talk about the needs of a 21st century learner, worker, professional in online education. They had to marry the two in a greater or lesser extent. And what I did with the articles was I pulled out key phrases. Then I grouped them together. And these are the 4 directions of learning that were most prevalent in those 32 articles. And if you look at them, and I'm not saying they were neatly categorized, there was a lot of overlap. But if you looked at them, if you think about applied and adaptive, you might think they're different. I'm focusing, I'm applying something, I'm adapting something, I'm much more fluid in mind. I'm integrating, bringing pieces together, I'm distributing, I'm pushing it outward. So it has very much a multi-directional feel. And that multi-directional feel, isn't that what we want? When was the last time you hired someone? And when you hired someone, and you were listening carefully to what they said, if they said, I have to work in this kind of environment, and oh, yeah, I don't do well with that. Oh, yeah, I don't know if that's gonna work, but this will work. I don't know, Carla, you're HR, would you thinking that's
Probably not.
Oh, that's not a good candidate, is it? But if you were saying that, I want a challenge. I like to find new solutions. I don't know what next year is going to bring, but I'm excited about it. Maybe we hire that person. So based on my research, this is what I found. When we looked at applied, these are, when we were talking like I had a whole research group with me. When I looked at applied, and I looked at these empirical articles, what I found was, now throughout the contemporary history of education, application has been important. So this is not a new concept. Theory to practice, I wish I could say that I invented that and I'm bringing it to you here tonight, but yeah, you bring up some plagiarism charges. But what online does, it brings application to a different, not a better or worse, but a different state. So a lot of what I found with the discussions on online, tangible markers of learning, that was one of my favorite phrases I found, is that you learn something and you have a tangible marker of it. We'll give an example. Portfolios, the word tangible came up a lot. Badges, situated learning, demonstrated competency. Remember we talked before about how credentials are great. We all want credentials. We love our CVs, they have credentials. But if we have competencies to back them up, isn't that greater? Like I said, AAC and U, very much a liberal arts type of organization, love them. They actually have many initiatives, one of them being the LEAP initiative, that talks about what are the competencies that employees must have. And they're not the hard skills that they're talking about. They're a combination of the soft skills, but they're also application skills. They actually have high impact practices that deliver soft skills plus application skills. So they have practica, internships, action research, service learning. And someone recently told me you couldn't do that online, but I see Michelle Jerkins in the audience, and you have students going out and learning from corporations about how to take what they learn and bring them back into the online environment. I think she's real, and I think she does that. So, but one thing we'll be seeing more in applied learning, badges or micro-credentials. So I'm going back and I'm interviewing that person who said, I only work from 3 to 4 best. I have to have coffee hour after that. I don't know, but I'm thinking the person who can show me their competencies. And their competencies that are not only valuable, but novel. So I do well with unstructured problems. I would do a backflip if I got someone come in and interview and tell me that, and could show me that someone has validated that learning. Is this prevalent? Is it everywhere? Do I see it on your LinkedIn profiles? Not yet, little by little. But Bill Wisser, instructional designer at Harvard School of Education, made a profound statement. He said, a diploma says as much about the institution you attended as it does about you. So it marks off that you did enough to pass the class, you attended. You got your transcript because it says you got your transcript, you graduated, you attended courses. But, as he says, a portfolio gets much more granular and badges can show individual records of accomplishment. So now that guy who came in and said he doesn't really work that well, but another person came and says, look, this is what I've got, I'm bringing it to you. I have value added, I have immediate value, I have long-term value. I'm loving it. So that's what we were looking for. And online, we'll get there. Face-to-face, we'll get there too. But online, you're in that sphere of an online learning environment where everything is tangible. Adaptability, this shouldn't surprise anyone. This is huge. Problem-based learning has been around forever. Our president made fun of me for spelling it out and calling it problem-based learning. He said, why don't you just call it PBL? I'm not in the cool class. So, so problem-based learning has been around forever. But in an online environment, you have that immediacy. You have the problem. You have a place to apply it. It gets tangible, it gets marked, it's visible, you can show it. So in looking at the phrases that came up that I grouped under this, a reconceptualization cycle, mediated learning, meaning making as you apply these solutions to problems, problem resolution strategy. I love unlearn what has been learned. So you thought you knew how to do it, but then when you went to apply it, it wasn't the best solution. And it tells you that. So you go back and you apply it. Scaffolded learning strategy. The first 3 times I tried it, it didn't work. So I am about to date myself here, the middle one. So a lot of people have heard about Second Life. I actually worked with a fabulous woman who did disaster relief in the Middle East. And she got frustrated because she was trying to teach students the reality of what it's like to go to a disaster area. So she brought them on Second Life. And she brought them into regions to show, look, this is an arid land. This isn't a land where you can get water easily. And she said it was just eye-opening. SimCity, I lost my rights as a mayor. So I have a background in studying public management. You know, how do you make decisions in a more public setting? And so I had to compete with people, and I put a park in a disadvantaged area, and it wasn't ready. And I'm no longer the mayor of that SimCity area. But I always think back, and I did stay up until I think 3 in the morning trying to get back my rights to that city. Still haven't gotten them. But if any of you have played these type of games where you make one move and then the next move, and then you lose your city. But support your local community, shop local. So we have a course here taught by Dr. Maripodi, Betty's Corner Store. Betty's Corner Store is great. And we want to go in and help Betty's Corner Store because the sales are down. But we know people will still come by, they'll still get their flour and whatever that is when you get when it snows, milk, egg, water flour, whatever that is. You can tell I don't shop, because I'd be in trouble with that recipe. But that's great, so we're going to help with that. We're going to give earlier broadcasts for the weather. But what happens when CVS moves down the street? What happens then when Whole Foods moves down the street? All of a sudden everything changes and you have to make those applications. So you're basing all your decision making on what is the best move, and you're seeing immediacy. Christopher Dady, professor in learning technology, says, in this environment, in this multi-user virtual environment, knowledge is grounded in a setting and distributed across the community. So I might be with a whole group trying to figure out, how do we save, my city, rather than isolated within, I could actually use a group at SimCity, rather than isolated within individuals. Problem finding is central to problem solving, and it really does mirror this new way of thinking about, I have a solution, I want to try it out. I don't want to research it and just wonder, I want to try it out. Okay, 2 more. So interactive learning. These are the phrases I found in my research. So challenging dialogue. Think of a course where you didn't have challenging dialogue. You went home that night, I don't know, you ate something and went to bed. You didn't stay with you until the next day, did it? Communities of inquiry, peer device constructs, all kinds of richly interactive, complex communications. So, my example again was I did get to work with someone from, New Zealand on looking at quality assurance. But what if we did more of that? What if you really got to take, my class right now, about 2 weeks ago, studied migration. And everyone took their migration to the United States. Everyone was obsessed with Donald Trump. I was so lucky it came right after the controversial statements. But everyone talked about migration to the States. And everyone talked about migration from Mexico upward. But what about the refugees who are getting off boats from Syria? Why aren't we talking about that? And if we are talking about that, why aren't we taking it beyond popular media and talking about someone who's there watching the boats come in or watching the boats leave? So this is something we could do more, and let's say Howard Gardner. Students must learn to traverse discontinuous cultural meaning systems, decode and make meaning in distinct places. So how can we leverage online more? And we have to get rid of all those discussions about the misnomers. That's one place, and then we can leverage it more. Last, and this was my favorite to learn because the others I expected. This one I didn't expect so much, even though I know about Jane's mobile marketing course. I still didn't expect this. So distributed learning. Also, we have science courses that do this. So you're in a learning management system. Are you trapped? You're not trapped. So this notion of diffuse concepts, really going out, wider bandwidth learning. But wouldn't you think if you were online that you were in your living room, on your computer, in your LMS, with the same group of 12 students, with the same teacher? Hardly. So we look at augmented reality. Why can't you take your mobile device out and learn from your environment and then bring it back? Do you see how much movement is going on? Do you see that learning is not linear? It's not linear and face-to-face, but online just blows it out of the water. So I once saw a course that went into the Louvre and looked at the paintings. Patrick teaches a course where he asks students to go into museums or other art sources, bring back their findings. I know a course that tells students to go to the Muddy River. I don't know if I'd go, but they go to the Muddy River, they get specimens from the water, they analyze it, they report back. We have a mobile marketing course that asks people to go out and come up with a mobile marketing campaign, looking at their environment, QR codes, and what they see in that environment, bring it back to a central campaign. So ubiquitous computing models, we're dating again. They allow students to carry mobile devices into real-world contexts, engage with virtual information that's superimposed in physical landscapes. Blooms. If you teach, you know blooms. We all know blooms. Blooms will be around forever. I would be shocked if anything actually replaces blooms, and I actually don't think it should. But what if we take it and we bring it to an online? Aren't we taking it and just blowing it out? We're taking all these tools, many of them which are free, many of them which are used in our daily life. You use Flickr all the time. Well, what if you brought up images and videos and all kinds of sources, and you brought it into your classroom with ease, with elegance? Okay. So what could on-ground learn from online? So one of the most troubling aspects of studies that have been done online is there's always a construct. It is. Is online as good as face-to-face? Why do we ask it like that? Why don't we compare online with online? Why don't we compare face-to-face with online? So what if we were to turn the pyramid around? So Peter Stokes, in Reinventing Higher Education, talked about faculty who taught online and went through the whole experience and said that when they came back to their face-to-face courses, they came back with some refreshed perspectives, and they introduced more technology and different ways of looking at education. Derek Bach, kind of credible, former president of Harvard, said, and he said this a very long time ago, I want to say early 80s, he forecasted the collaborative work of such a team of faculty, designers, and technicians in creating a finished product for online courses will itself provoke more discussion, so more reflection, about pedagogical methods than teachers in a university normally experience. If you teach regularly, you're in this room, you have all had the case where you got a syllabus on Friday and taught on Monday. Am I saying that's the norm of higher ed? Of course not. But it should never be. And something unless it should never be an instance unless it is a sheer emergency. This process of putting an online course together is incredibly intentional, incredibly thoughtful. And the beauty of it is by doing this on a daily basis, we're collecting boundless evidence about how people teach, how people learn, and how knowledge is created. So what can on-ground learn from online? This notion of clear architecture for teaching and learning, it is all there. We can map it, we can touch it, we can feel it. We're mapped to outcomes. We're looking at a learning-centered paradigm. We're still looking at teaching. That's never going to be a contest between the two, but we're looking at outcomes. We're looking at how do you integrate resources and synthesize them. So you have an assignment and then you have a blueprint for the resources that help you get there. You have plan measures for assessment. Again, rubrics are, I talked with Carla just briefly on email about this. Rubrics are used much more in online courses. I told you, 15 years of teaching, never really used a rubric. A clear narrative for learning that you can later draw upon. You have all these instances that you're learning. I go back in online courses I took years ago and I pull information and thoughts I had. Assurance of engagement, you know you'll be talking. You know you'll not only be talking, but talking to a whole circle of folks. Experiment with technology, and that was a big finding that Peter Stokes came upon, was that people realized that technology, which seems so cumbersome, is actually going to help me. It's going to be like a co-teacher with me. And reflection on learning theory, and new learning theories. Okay, so this is where we're going to tell you, you are now going to go study online, a course at NECB. Anywhere that has online education. And what are you going to do when you go and you talk with someone about learning online? So here is your adult online learner backpack. I walk in the college and I talk with admissions. Admissions, they're great. They're my cheerleaders. They want me to enroll. They want me to get an education. They will be my friends forever. I can't just stop there though. So what are the questions I ask? And some of these questions are broad, some of them are narrow, and some of them are demanding. But there are questions you need to ask. And admissions can answer some, and they can't answer others. But in that whole sphere of a college or university, they should be able to answer these. Who develops your courses? Are they off a shelf? When I've seen an online course develop poorly and looked at an evaluation, it says, felt like a canned course. Felt like there was no teacher on the other side. You don't want that, do you? I mean, that's not why you get an online education. Who develops the courses? Is the faculty member central to that? Is there an instructional designer who has an expertise in this area? You want them to give you a narrative of the process. And admissions might not be able to answer it, that's fine. Who can? How large are the classes? Remember before we talked about online could seem like the answer. You could put hundreds of people in that class. It's not a MOOC, because if it was a MOOC, guess what? It'd be free, and you wouldn't have that tuition bill. So how large are the classes? On average. Accreditation. So what's the marker of there's a rumor out there that online education, if you get an online degree, it won't transfer. Employers won't recognize it. There's not evidence for that, not in scholarship. However, accreditation is the marker. Accreditors have gotten to understand. Our president was actually invited to our commission's retreat a few years ago with only one other college president to let them know not what is online education, but what is quality online education, and what are those markers, because the accreditor is a quality assurance group. So what kind of accreditation do you have? Beyond that, what kind of benchmarks do you map yourself against? Sloan Consortium, now called Online Learning Consortium, has been around for a long time. They were one of the originals to come out and say, this is what quality looks like, this is what quality doesn't. Do you map to their standards? Do you map to crack standards? Council for Regional Accredited Colleges. Commissions. How do you know that you have quality in your courses? This should be a conversation. And if someone can't have this conversation, no one on campus can have this conversation, I'm not sure. How often should I expect feedback from my faculty? This should be an easy one. And if they don't know, you know who you need to talk with. What type of technology do you use in your classes? And I'm going to let Patrick close it.
Okay. I'm going to sit here next to the microphone and make sure everyone can hear me. Are faculty accessible? How can you get in touch with them, and how often can you get in touch with them? Is it 24/7 like Carla Padalano? Can you get in touch with her any time of day, any time of night?
Just a text, I tell them. Anytime, send me a text message.
But you know, being in an online school, sometimes the thought is you can only get in touch with them through email, which is fine for some students, I think. But some students, even at the online school, want to be able to get in touch by phone, and that's important. So you should ask that question. And on that note, can I talk to a faculty member before I decide to enroll? I think you should be able to. Maybe not every school has that policy, but again, I think it's important that a school is able to answer those questions.
Patrick,
Yes.
can I add? I think you should be able to talk with an online student too. If you
That's
want
not
to.
up
Good
there.
point.
That's a good point.
That's an excellent
Yes,
point.
absolutely. What type of student services do you have? Of course, advising, career services. That's not all, but that's just two examples. And I think it's important that they not only be able to answer that, but kind of give you an example of what it looks like, give you a tour through those services. What kind of technical support do you have? Of course, being an online school, you have to be able to answer those things. Do you have 24/7 technical support? I think that's important as well. How many hours of engagement are expected? Of course, there are federal regulations on this, and so they have to be able to answer that way. And so the information should be readily available. And last but not least, same idea, federal regulations. What are graduates doing, graduates of the program doing with their education? Hopefully, again, this information is fairly easily available so that they can provide to you when asked.
Another question, Patrick, I think is asking about the people who you are in class with. So tell me more, just a story. Faculty can usually do, and a program chair, I'm sure sometimes admissions has people as well, but they can talk about where they work, what they do, the kind of person you're to be sitting, quote, sitting next to in class or working with a group, because you are going to learn so much from the people that you're in class with.
I think that's excellent, yes.
That's
Can
an
you
excellent
repeat the
point.
question to the people online?
What,
Or
which-
repeat the comment?
Can you mind repeating that?
Oh, so I was saying the other thing I think is important is to consider who it is that you're in school with and ask some questions about the types of people that you'll be, quote, sitting next to in class. Where do they work? What do they do? Because you're going to learn so much from them, or as much from them as you will learn from your instructor.
Absolutely.
Kind of like who is your community, in a sense?
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Because you can't see them, so you don't know who's studying next to you, what level before you get involved in that.
But you have to leverage parts of the course such as the introductions at the
Absolutely.
beginning. And that's where you can do exactly that. And
Group projects.
if you really just list what they should put in there, suddenly you get this rich description
Yes.
of who the student is.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, that's a great point. So now we're going to open up to questions, but I also want to add that we have a community of teachers and learners in the room and designers. So I would also, similar to Carl and Chris, open it up for comments on what we've talked about, as well as questions from our online audience. Janine?
So I've taught both on ground for many years, and then also am now teaching online. And I never really thought about it, but as a on-ground faculty member, the challenge is really, the students really learn from my experience and some of the assignments in the book, and you rely more heavily on your experience and your knowledge on the subject matter and what's in the textbooks and the assignments. When now that I teach online, I feel like I synthesize more. I pull in information from lots of the experts and add my own perspective on top of everybody else's expert opinion. So it's much more industry focused, experts focused than when I sit up in front of the classroom and I talk to them and try to engage them. I think there's a lot of value there. The second, and I never really thought about that until I'm like, yeah, that's a big difference, is where when you showed the pyramid at the end, is really, that's what online does, is it takes all of those components that are automatically out there, in the digital space, and really pulls it together, pulls the little key ingredients together for the best learning for the students. So I like that. The second piece is, I believe in the future, it's going to be all about these badges and the credits. And so when you sit in a classroom, you don't necessarily get that. But when you start synthesizing all of the pieces together and you start working with colleges or with these emerging models like degree.com that is putting together your badges into a visible portfolio online that future employers can look at and say, oh, they've watched this video, they've read this, they've watched this lecture, and that's all content that we've synthesized in our classroom, but then they get credits for it out on degree.com, which maps into LinkedIn profile. So the model of applied learning is really changing. That I think that ties in with badging more to online than it does on ground.
Absolutely. Excellent points. Michelle?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on, and like Janine, I taught initially in the classroom and then moved online, and so I'm one of those people who had that transition. And the big thing that I noticed that now that I've taught online for several years is that I have decoupled, I mean intentionally decoupled the content that I want the students to learn with the delivery method. When I was in the classroom, although of course we would have different types of experiences and different types of assignments, you were still heavily relying on the fact that you were going to walk into the classroom and, you know, talk or deliver a lecture, and that interaction in the classroom, that was still fundamentally what you relied on heavily. Whereas now, as an online faculty member, I consciously choose assignments carefully to allow students to learn in different ways and match those to the type of content and the type of thing I want them to learn. And that's a very different and it's a very deliberate change, I would say.
Absolutely, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Great point, Chris.
More to Michelle's point, I think she's absolutely right. And I too taught many, many years on ground. And I felt, actually, in retrospect, that that's far more restrictive. You're restricted to a classroom, to a building, to a campus, with people who have a centralized kind of life right there. You don't have that online.
Yeah.
Right.
And online, I am much freer to send my students to a supermarket to do an analysis of produce section, to do market research, and the whole concept of getting them out of the classroom is
Yeah.
much easier online than it is on ground.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, when they're on ground, they're like teaching at UNH, it was like everybody's on campus and you do an
Right.
assignment.
Yes.
Like
You've
if you
got
go to a
them.
supermarket, they only go to the cafeteria, they don't go to a.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're closed in
Yeah,
a central
yeah,
place, and
yeah.
they can't get out of that.
I feel like I have access to their thoughts in a way I never had face-to-face. So I'm teaching sociology, so we're talking about contemporary issues. And they'll bring the conversation in another direction that I didn't expect. And I wouldn't perhaps know in a 2.5-hour class, 3-hour class. And I'm able to throw in whatever, TED Talks or some kind of news article, something that brings them back to Boston or across the globe. And I wouldn't have had access to their minds like that in the face-to-face because they may not have thought about it until after the 3-hour class. When I taught face-to-face, I always felt I'd go home 2 days later and send those long emails saying, hey, I thought about what you were talking about. But
Yeah.
I said, do you really think they were listening to me? So,
Right.
But here I do feel like I've integrated that into what their thought process is from Monday to Wednesday. So it's, you know.
And when kids are in the classroom and you're teaching, they're all focused on you. Some of them may be sleeping, but
No.
Not in Janine's class.
but when they're online and they're in a discussion board and something comes up, they're already on their computer. They zip over to do a Google search. They bring back more content. So it really, the dynamics, if you really think about what happens in the online classroom, because it opens up the digital world versus in the classroom. People bring their laptops, but their focus is on the instructor.
It's like having 100% participation
Yeah.
versus 10% if you're lucky
Yeah.
on ground.
And the other point that I wanted to bring is that it also brings, we've talked about this as well, is like, I do my best learning in the morning, in the afternoon, I'm a little sleepy. And then at night after 5, I get this boost of energy. And in the work world, I'm the same way. I'm like super active in the morning, super active after 5 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, not so much.
Right.
And if you tie into some of the TED Talks that you're hearing, that's the best way for the future of learning and the future of the workforce is people working from home and having the quality of lifestyle. But the online learning is designed that way. So when they're in discussions, there's no time that they actually have to be interacting for most classes, and they can do it when their brain works best.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Carla.
Yeah, I can attest to that because I do my best thinking at night, and I never had a job to let me do my best thinking at night. So I think I feel like I shine with this because I can really, that's when my brain works best. Everybody's different, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
And there's TED Talks that support that.
Yeah. And we believe TED Talks all the time.
I
I
love
do. Even when they disagree, I believe them.
Yeah.
I'm happy they disagree. Carla?
Well, one of the things, so I've taught face-to-face and then have taught online in hybrid and taught online in quite a few different places. And There's a really big difference from one school to another, the approach, how things are structured, and you can't say that all online, it's all created equal. Everybody does discussion boards, everybody does whatever it happens to be. There are some things you can expect, I think, to see in most online courses, but the way the courses are developed and who's involved, and the fact that the courses are, just like when you do teach face-to-face, if you teach a course regularly, the courses are improved regularly and things are changed on a regular basis and tweaked to adjust for whatever happens to be happening in the world. Not all online works that way. Not all approaches to development work that way. So it is important to know that what you experience one place could be very different from somewhere else, and so the model really has to be one that fits for you. I know there are schools that have discussions where it's really throw out some opinion. There's no expectation you're really going to engage. It's an exercise because we all expect online to have a discussion board. It's not really an opportunity to learn from each other, from your faculty, or to engage with the content. So really need to know and explore what that looks like if you're considering, I think, online.
Well, that's another question for our backpack, is what do the discussion boards look like?
Yeah.
What is expected in them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would, just to underline Carla's point, I think it's really important who's teaching you.
Yeah.
If, at the end of the day, an education should challenge students. I mean, you as someone who's going for an education should go in and say, I don't want to just learn a couple of things and have my ideas reinforced by somebody who says, oh yes, that's a wonderful idea. It doesn't really challenge me. At the end of the day, you learn because you're challenged in your thinking, and then it opens up your mind. And that's the big wows that we all remember when we were students, is when, oh wow, gee, I didn't think of it like that.
Right.
So I would say that one of the most important things you need to ask yourself if you're looking at a college is to see who's teaching you online. If it is, and I don't want to say anything bad, but if it is someone who's just facilitating and you're on a discussion board where someone doesn't have either the professional or the academic experience, to be able to open up, who knows their stuff, and to open up your mind into these new avenues, then maybe you're not really getting the kind of learning that you should be in your college education.
Absolutely.
Be it online or on the ground. But I mean, I think online sometimes you do need to ask those questions.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great point. Ed?
I think that the majority of the students that we take are usually adult learners, and one of the questions that they may have, or the hesitation they may see, the lack of contacts, human contacts with their online instructors, which I find it very interesting. As a matter of fact, when you teach on site, on physical site, you have limited amount of contacts with your instructor compared to online, which really is unlimited. In terms of email, text, phone call, I mean, weekend, I mean, in reality, so I think it's not a bad idea to set the record straight for new candidates, for new students that who are looking into online modality as their future, education. They should not let their heart be troubled, because if they feel that they don't have that enough contacts with the instructors, exactly opposite. And online, they have the best contacts ever.
Yeah, it's an expansion of the office hour,
Yes.
right? Yeah, exactly. Time and space.
Yeah, and it's funny. Sometimes in a face-to-face environment, you think about, Michelle's talking about, coming in and who you're learning from. And sometimes I know in a face-to-face environment, it's the person comes in, and I've been guilty of this in a face-to-face environment. It's like the sage on the stage. It's entertainment. I'm coming in. I'm delivering this exciting, lecture. I'm gonna challenge you, and then I'm gonna leave, and that's gonna be it. It's really all about me in that instance. Quite frankly, if we're really being honest with ourselves. It's that. The sage on the stage, this rock star in front of the room, and then online, it's not about you really at all, at all.
Right.
So it's really all about them. So it's different. It takes some adjusting as faculty too. Not everybody is suited for that either.
Exactly. Excellent points. Okay. Do we have any questions online? I think Jason's been answering that.
Yeah, they're good.
Okay.
I have that answer.
Thank you. Hopefully not.
Sure.
They don't know what they're talking about. You tell me. Jason has become the online teacher in this setting.
All right, good.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
everyone. We'll be around a bit to answer questions, but I would also invite you to ask one another because, so many people in this room have such a wealth of information. So, but thank you for looking at the different paradigms in which we can understand online education, and we are all advocates for quality. So let's go out and be that.
Thank you.